That goes back to his question that it's the traditional identity where there's security, although it can't be that tremendously strong because remember these poor people are cut off totally from Hungary, yes.
Is it that if they remain peasants on the farm, they don't have a boss?
Exactly. Because they still got some piece of property. They're the boss. They're the boss of shit shoveling, but they're the boss. Whereas the woman would be doing the shit shoveling for her, so she would be the servant.
Anywhere.
Anywhere, yes. And the same thing is happening in Spain today, that the women have lots of farms, and these villages are full of men who can't get wives. And how are they trying to solve that problem? Yes? You know the answer?
Yeah, people like brought this up all the time.
Well, but it's...
I think they pay women to go?
Well, sort of, not exactly.
Oh my god, I completely forgot exactly what it was.
Well, okay, then I'll tell you. What they do, so the women, the Spanish women, have exactly this attitude. I can go to the city and be a clerk or whatever.
Spanish.
What?
You said Spanish.
Spanish, what did I say?
Yeah, okay. You're talking about...
I'm talking about Spain now, we're in the same situation. And you heard this last year, so you should remember. So shut up. Okay, so what happens in Spain? The same situation. How did they try to solve it? These guys couldn't solve it at all. They just didn't have women. Because there was going to be no Austrian women who was going to come and shovel their shit, obviously. So they had no solution. But in Spain, there is a solution that's not working yet too well, but they bus in women to hope that they get them together. But who are the women they bus in? They are Spanish speaking, so that part is easy, because they are the poor women who come from Peru, Colombia, and these countries, some of whom are there illegally, who are doing these terrible jobs. And so if they marry a Spaniard,
They get the passport.
that's right. That's right. Okay, Dominicans, fascinating. So let's at least do the Dominicans. Bailey, the language of multiple identities among Dominican Americans. So, while 90% of Dominicans have sub-Saharan African ancestry, how do they identify when asked, who are you? They will say, do I have it here somewhere? Yes. They'll say, this is one's not Dominicans in who you ask in the Dominican Republic, okay? We're talking about Nuyorican Dominicans, right? I'm Hispanic. I'm Spanish. I'm Latino or Latina. I put Latinx for Ernesto's sake, but they really wouldn't say that for the most part, unless they happen to be in a political movement and so forth. Now, what is peculiar about this is that all these, the first and the last, well, okay, what is peculiar about this?
We don't have Dominican.
Well, sometimes they actually say Dominican also, okay. And that's problematic too, but it's less problematic because maybe they were born there, or at least their parents were born there. The way people will say, I'm Polish, and it was one grandparent came from Poland or something like that. Or when people say to me, oh, I'm Hungarian too. And then I say, oh, really? Do you speak Hungarian?
Oh, really?
And it's not nice. Okay, that's not my linguist speaking, it's my ethnic pride speaking. Okay, so what's peculiar about the other three words? Yes?
They all mean like different things. Like Hispanic means Spanish speaker, Spanish means from Spain, and Latinx means from Latin America.
But none of them mean what they are.
Yeah.
And particularly Spanish, and that's why I put that in quotes. And we want to see some of the things they say about that, which is amazing. So, why do they say that? Because Dominicans, members of the Dominican second generation, we're talking the second generation, because someone who just came 5 years ago, he or she would say, I'm Dominican, obviously. Members of the Dominican second generation don't identify themselves in terms of phenotype, that is racially, as African American or black. And it's very important, and it's in all of Latin America this way, actually. But rather in terms of language as, quote, Spanish. The many second-generation Dominicans who are phenotypically indistinguishable from African Americans speak Spanish in order to counter others' assumption they are African. So this is called reactive ethnicity. So you're emphasizing your ethnicity because you don't want to be identified as something else, including, as we're going to see, when you can be Spanish when you don't even speak Spanish, because many second-generation people don't speak Spanish, just like they don't speak Polish or Hungarian. It's not peculiar to Dominicans, so in all of anybody like that, it's problematic. It's just a little bit more problematic with Spanish, as we'll see one of the quotes, because if somebody says to me, I'm Hungarian, at least for whatever it's worth, and it's not worth very much, because I study you speak Hungarian, but they could say, well, my grandparents came from Hungary, okay, so at least it's my background is Hungarian. But in the case of saying I'm Spanish, it has nothing to do with it. So, for example, on page 268 here, much of the literature on code switching has emphasized in-group connotations of the code used by a minority group in informal and family settings. So, Spanish, oh, I'm sorry, that is not the quote I wanted, it's an important quote. But somewhere here, see if I don't go in order to screws it up. Okay, we'll have to go back to that. But there's a quote here where they say to them, so why do you say you're Spanish? And the person says, well, I speak Spanish, although they may not also. And then the other person says, okay, I speak English, but I'm not English. So it has nothing to do with the background, but let's go back and do it in order. Okay, so language functions here as an emblem of identity again. As in the common Dominican usage, the term Spanish is an description of ethnic racial identity, but it's also a tool to show what your identity is, basically. However, many Dominicans are not only diglossic, so English is the high language in school, and Dominican Spanish is the intimacy language, but very often they are heteroglossic to some level. What is heteroglossia is multilingual, but heteroglossia is used in saying, instead of saying trilingual, glossia is used when not necessarily all of them are languages, but they could be dialects of a language. So they're heteroglossic because they speak Dominican Spanish as an intimate language. They speak school English, so standard English. And because of the neighborhoods they live in, they also may know, at least to some level, exactly, African-American vernacular English. And they use all these three also in displaying identity and code switching. And so what is code switching? One of the linguistics majors is going to tell us in 1 second what is code switching, so I can give you these wonderful quotes here.
Is that like when you switch between languages, basically just to better your own situation, like whatever situation you're in, just to like advance your situation?
Well, but that's too general. The first part is right, but just to advance your situation, no, because you can't do that. You're not going to come in here in this class and code switch normally.
It has to do with prestige, right?
No, it has to do with intimacy and in-group solidarity. You would never use it in a high situation, right? You could do it in this class because it's a linguistics class to show something. But if you were sitting in a class or in a court of law or something, you wouldn't use your intimate language. But we girls are talking, and we all bilingual, so we switch intersententially or intrasententially to quote what somebody said, or even within the sentence, and that only we can speak that way. Going forward to North Africa, for example, where you're going to read that Moroccan article, I spent quite a bit of time in Tunisia. And I lived with a colleague, who I'll tell you about more on Monday, who spoke Arabic, not classical Arabic, because the women didn't know that. And she was, her high language was French, and she was totally native-like in French, and she was also an English teacher. And of course, I speak no Arabic. And she would get on the phone with one of her friends, and she'd be speaking about making plans where we're all going to go. And then she'd come back to me and want to explain to me what happened on the telephone. Where are we going? I said, I know what we're doing, because I can understand what you're saying, because I speak French. So there was enough of it was French rather than Arabic, so that in that code switching, I could gather what she was saying. But she wasn't using it for that reason. She was using it with her friends because they were performing secular